Hello and welcome to the CNBC Africa's special panel discussion. In the next 30 minutes, you will be with me, Narengwa Fiona Muthoni, as we discuss the ease of doing business reforms. Now, according to World Bank's annual Doing Business report, Rwanda maintained its second position on the continent, just behind Mauritius. Globally, Rwanda was ranked 38 and scored 76.3 points against 100, representing a drop of 9 positions from last year's edition, when the country was ranked 29th position. We have a panel here. Next to me, we have Fred Mugisha, who is the Director of Urban Planning and Construction One-Stop Center, City of Kigali. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We also have right next to him Ted Kaberuka, an economic analyst. And the lady on the panel is Louise Kanyonga, the Chief Strategy and Compliance Officer at the Rwanda Development Board. And lastly, we have Butare Eli, who is an architect. As we start off this conversation, I would like to start with you, Louise. What does the latest reports really mean and signify for Rwanda?
Thank you. I think looking at the latest report that was released, I think it really solidifies Rwanda as one of the most attractive places to do business, to invest in, not only in Africa, where we were ranked consistently again as the second easiest place to do business, but also globally, where we were the 38th easiest place to do business. And again, maintaining as, if not only the only low-income economy within that, the top 50 easiest places to do business. So this is really coming off, a very concerted and consistent effort by the government of Rwanda to reform our business environment, for over 20 years. And I think, the rankings really show that that Rwanda continues to be a very globally competitive place to do business in.
Yeah. Now, Louise, to just set a pace for the conversation, why are the rankings important for Rwanda? And the 9th position drop that we experience, how much of an impact will this have?
Yeah, so, the rankings, the report by the World Bank is something that we have used as a tool for policy reform, like I said, for, since 2005. It's one of the many tools that we have in place to really make Rwanda a globally competitive economy. But this report in particular stood out for us because of, several aspects. One is that it is undeniably a very important guiding and reference tool for investors that are looking to where to invest, across the globe in a very, competitive space, as you can imagine. And so they look at it as a signal as to where, what is a safe place to invest, what is a great place for you to invest. And we've seen that actually does mean, it does translate on the ground. As we have consistently improved our rankings in the report, we've seen a correlation in terms of improvements and growth in investment. So over the last 10 years, for instance, we've had a 60% growth in investments. Of that 60%, close to 40% coming from foreign direct investments.
Now, Ted, to come to you from what she has just said, that in the recent report by World Bank, there was a new methodology that was actually included. What is your opinion on this? And do you think that them including it a bit last minute was unfair?
No, it's not unfair, because the same methodology is used to assess all the countries. So it gives a chance to different countries to rate themselves to those new indicators in even the weighing. I think what is interesting in the methodology itself, even on the entire package of assessing countries, is they don't keep the indicator on the same, like throughout 10 years. They keep changing, because what is the aim of the ranking is to mirror the economies of different countries, so that wherever you feel you are weak, you can still work on it and improve it. So even if they would introduce a new indicators, you may drop this year, but if you work to address it, then next year you can catch up. So I don't see any problem, actually. Yes. It's a very good sign that much as you can celebrate your best ranking, but also you should also have strategy to improve where the score was low.
Fred, to come to you, could you tell us how the construction reforms performed in this year's report?
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. I think for construction permitting indicator, we quite did well compared to last year, because we have dropped from 106 position to 81 position, which is good. And I think we did very significant reforms, even though the World Bank is not actually capturing all the reforms. But what we did, we actually put the environment of business legislation that attached to construction permitting more conducive and competitive through revising different ministerial orders that will touch the building permitting, so that we can actually move these difficult procedures that is no longer needed in practice, while improving the quality. That's actually the key things. We can actually eliminate different procedures, different associated time and costing to each procedures, but harmonizing the quality concept that we need. So whatever we do, we want actually to improve the quality in terms of construction and building as a whole.
Ellie, you are an architect. Fred has just touched on the reforms. You, as someone who deals with this on a daily basis, have you felt any impact on the ground?
Yes, thank you, Fiona. We have felt the impact, and that much. If you look at the reforms that have been made, 7 of them, and we've had an impact in one cost that the clients or the developers have been facing so as to start up their development. We've also had a reduction in the time while applying for permits. It has been actually been taking a bit of time to procure a permit, but now there's been a reduction in timing where you've been, before actually you even get to the applying for a permit, at the pre-phase of applying for a permit, you've had technical reports that you have to procure, topographic reports that you have to procure, environmental assessment certificates that you have to procure. For some categories from up to 2 and warehouses, this documentation that has been requested has been removed, and you find the timing to go for a developer to come in and start his own that's a development that they want to put up. It's easier now. And when you apply for a permit, you get it in a shorter period of time, which has brought up people to dare. Because if you have a lot of money that you're investing in the startup before even you start your development, and you go to the permitting, you invest a lot of money, so you get scared. Now, these reforms have created, have removed that fear, and we've seen many individuals coming in, and the increase of investors has increased, actually. So we've felt the reforms, the impact of the reforms.
Yes, you felt the impact of the 7 reforms that were implemented this year. But as someone who works on ground, as someone who knows what actually is happening, what are some of the things that you'd say should actually be done? What are some of the things that Fred should put in more effort in regards to the construction reforms?
We appreciate that the reforms that have already been put in place, there is a reduction that has been made. Even furthermore, reduction would actually impact more and bring in more investors, and we who are doing the development would push even further more projects in that period that has been reduced. Yes.
Now, Louise, to come to you, just sitting next to Ellie, we've seen the World Bank started assessing an active stock market. And as part of the indicators in the report, a country is supposed to have at least 10 active players, and Rwanda's stock market has about 7. You know, what are some of the efforts and what are the plans on ground that the government is planning in order to make the stock market as active, the Capital Market Authority to be more vibrant?
Yeah. So just picking on what he said, I think it's before I respond to that directly, I think it's very important for it to be clear that as a government, we've actually been very supportive of changes to the methodology and the constant refinement of the report to really reflect, what is modern practice, what's the best practice, because business and the business environment is extremely dynamic. You have to keep up. And so we've always been very strongly supportive of that. And it's happened before. We've had indicators introduced, we've had methodology changes. I think it's just really about making sure that there is open, transparent communication to reforming countries so that they're aware of what is coming, and it really informs us, it's very valuable information for us as we're determining what our policy actions are going to be. Now, coming to the stock market, he said it very well, that it's a fairly, young market. The Rwanda Stock Exchange, under the regulatory supervision of the Central Bank, Ministry of Finance, have really engaged in very strong, sensitization and communication to get our private sector to understand, what are the benefits that a stock market offers and why should more people be looking to the stock market, as a very valuable option for raising capital, to grow business. And so we're really going to double down on those efforts in really engaging our business community to start to look at these alternative sources of capital, such as the stock market, and sort of, move them from the more conventional and traditional forms of raising capital through, commercial debt. Now, this, as I said, has been ongoing, but we're really going to double down. It's been a wake-up call, but also importantly, we already have several companies that are in the pipeline that have pretty much been on the brink of going to the market. And so we are going to accelerate, the efforts in regard to those companies, make sure that they are listed as soon as possible. These are things that can be fairly, quickly expedited, give them all the necessary support. The great thing is that we already have a fantastic regulatory environment that makes it easy to onboard companies onto the stock exchange and to also, make sure that as they are on the market operating, trading, the regulatory environment is extremely smooth. So that makes it a lot easier for Rwanda as perhaps, another country where you have to do both, the regulatory frameworks, the institutional frameworks, and then also, getting companies listed. So we already have a very solid starting ground. It's about doubling down on engagement and communication sensitization, and then also expediting the companies that we already have in the pipeline, to list. So we're fairly confident that you're going to see a lot of reform in the next coming years. I think Rwanda has a track record, which I think is a key differentiator for Rwanda, is that we have tremendous political will towards making it easy for people to do business. So this is something that we'll continue to do.
Yeah. Now, Ted, she's touched on from a policy, what the government can really do, because every person has to an extent where they can actually do things. But then also the private sector has a key role to play when it comes to developing the capital markets. And it's not only in Rwanda, the whole continent, capital markets are still underdeveloped. What are some of the things that need to be done in order to jumpstart? Because there's a lot of untapped potential in the capital markets.
Yeah, well, when you see how it operates and the outcome of it, it's still at baby stage, to be honest, because not only the company which are listed on the capital market knows what is happening. I don't think the normal citizen know what is happening, and yet they are the client to the capital market. You and I should be the people going there with maybe $100. I buy my shares, and then after two months I can trade them. We are the key player actually. Unfortunately, the public is not aware that much. That's one. People don't know if they can invest or at which level they can gain. Two, the related services to the capital market are not much developed. I mean, not only traders, not only listed, but there are other related services. Because when you see the developed capital market in other countries, it's become itself a way of investing even from home. If someone can buy from Tokyo market to the whatever, Canada or America, why not transition to Rwanda? You can buy here, sell here, and then resell again, because it became another way of trading globally. So we need to enter in that global trade movement in other capital markets. So we need that interconnection with other markets. That is very critical, because if we have that track record of having a stable economy, so people should have confidence investing in our economy. So if we don't give them facility to access, to place their capital, then we are still lagging behind.
Yes.
Another service which is related to that is how do we accommodate the startups? Because they have very high potential in terms of growth. A bigger company, the growth rate of a big company is much smaller than the startups. So how do we bring that big pool of startups to to this world of trading and selling and capital gain, so that people can jump on some opportunities.
And I'd like to throw it to you, Louise, because we saw that this year Rwanda reformed about 4 areas in measured by doing business in the 2018-2019 report. Tell us more about this, and also going forward, what are some of the key areas that will have much focus?
Okay. Thank you. So there were 4 areas of reform that were captured by the World Bank. There were obviously a lot more that we had reformed, as Fred mentioned, and that we continue to engage the World Bank to also start to look at those reforms. But this year what was captured were reforms in starting a business, where we made it easier for new businesses. Ted talked about startups. So we introduced a reform where businesses that have just incorporated and for the first 2 years are exempt from paying for a trading license, which is a local government tax that is payable in the district where business is located. So really to reduce the startup and operational costs for businesses, we felt that it was important to make it easier at the beginning by reducing that cost. We also had a reform that was captured in getting electricity, and this is really a continuation of very concerted efforts that have been made by the government through the Rwanda Energy Group to improve the quality and the reliability of supply of electricity, because this is one of the key constraints that was now facing businesses and particularly industry. We had done a lot of work to increase the supply and to make sure that we didn't have issues with generation and capacity, but in terms of reliability, we're still seeing issues around several outages, the ability to measure those outages and the impact it had on businesses. So a lot of infrastructure was built, such as substations and transmission lines and so on, to reduce how many outages businesses were facing. And now we have an extremely competitive rate of, on average, just maybe 10 outages a year that last a total average of 2.8 hours. This is an annual average. So extremely low, extremely competitive, particularly for countries in the region. We had reforms also that Fred touched on construction permits, being able to obtain construction permits, significant reduction in the time that is required, for instance, to get a water connection, and then also adding an extra layer of quality and professionalism in the building sector, because now all professionals who are involved in the construction of a building are required to take out insurance for any latent defect liabilities that become apparent once the building is in use. So really tying them to a certain level of accountability in delivering quality, durable construction. The last area that was captured by the World Bank is in enforcing contracts, where we saw a significant reduction in the cost that a business has to undertake once they are pursuing a commercial claim. So in terms of court fees, we made sure that those were reduced, but also attorney costs, which were a significant percentage of the costs that businesses had to take on if they were taking a commercial court case to court.
Eli, she touched on some of the reforms, and the electricity reforms actually got me thinking. When I was doing research, I saw that Kigali electricity access has over 70% versus the 9 to 15% in other provinces. And now when we also look at the Kigali city, also provides about 54% of formal jobs in Rwanda compared to 12% by the secondary cities. So what should be done in order to decentralize these from just the impact being felt mostly in Kigali, but also to the rural areas?
If you look at the reforms that are in place on some of the regulations and laws that have been put in place, I'll first acknowledge the efforts that the government has put in place, and highlight that from my point of view, is that we're in the correct path. All we need is more effort. What the government has done, and with the help of also the population, is that there is the different services that have been moved from the city to the different secondary cities that we have, which become supporting facilities or help also in the growth. One, we've started with the districts, some of the government institutions that have been taken to the different secondary cities, which if these institutions are taken, their staff follow. And then we've had different services, hotels that have been focused in the different secondary cities, which become supporting services for the cities to grow. And having done that, this brings in the infrastructure follows. If infrastructure comes in and other facilities that help in the growing of the cities come in and help and continue. So which complements what comes in, also works in hand with the reforms that have been done. With this facilitation that has been done, it helps in also the increment of the different services that have been placed in the secondary cities, which provide now, if you have the services there, you have the infrastructure there, now you get the job also, instead of feeling it in Kigali only, now you start feeling it in the secondary cities there. Yes.
Now, Fred, to come to you, how can ICT be leveraged to ease the process of construction permits here in the country? And what are some of the innovations that are already on ground?
Fiona, thank you. I think what we did actually to engage in ICT in our service delivery for day-to-day is actually in permitting services. We normally issue construction permit online. If you compare the impact of online services compared to the just routine services that we used to have without having these online services, it was actually one of the reforms we did in the previous years that we are going now to capture all the services online. So the construction permitting now is actually submitted via online platform, and the feedback is already given to the online platform as well, which has significantly reduced the time that was actually required to get a construction permit from almost 300 days up to 30 days today. And again, the procedures and costing. You know, when you are submitting things online, this is where we're going to submit on our soft copies. And previous years, we are actually submitting the hard copies. You get this time of going and printing this A0 format and they bring it. There was a queue of line services. So what we did is actually to go smart everywhere in different services, including the construction permitting as a key indicator in doing construction in the World Bank indicators. So actually the services that is already offered through the construction permitting indicators, either viewing the master plan is actually published online. And you can actually sit comfortably in your offices and you submit a request via online, and within a period of time that is actually mandated by the law, you get a feedback.
Ted, to come to you, how much are the reports, findings, and reality on ground connected? Because when the reforms are being implemented, it takes a while for it to actually get to the grassroots areas. So the connection there, talk to us about that.
Well, you see, the reforms, it's a continuous process. And the end users, sometimes they don't cope up with the change. You know, sometimes you find someone who is still referring to non-existing policy or procedure. So it happened. It's not only in Rwanda, it's happened everywhere, because people don't have the culture of reading all the publications, reading all the reforms. It's something which, especially the strategists, need to have a proper mechanism to communicate the changes in a very friendly format. You know, like the simplest way you can communicate, a short message, but people get it and can spread to the majority of the people. Secondly, the engagement with the media is very critical. How do you use the media to spread the message? Because even the people from the media, they are not informed. So it's even chaotic if the media are not informed and the audience won't be informed at all. So that gap is still there. And especially when it comes to something which requires finance. You know, if you imagine if you would invest in a document for which no one will asking you the document. It's a waste of time, a waste of resources, and at the end people are frustrated. But again, if I come back to his comment of digitalizing things, that's where things become much easier. Before starting any process, you know what the requirements are. so you can know the changes, where the changes are happening.
I think we're a government that is, has demonstrated that we're very interested in results and accountability. Very difficult for you to get actual results on the ground if you don't have very clear, and strong systems in place that are able to measure progress. So the government of Rwanda has done several things in that regard. We have invested very heavily in the use of technology to be able to help us to collect data. If you've been following closely, what we have done is that several government services have been migrated to become digital online services where data is collected in real time. We have a very strong statistics body that we have reinforced over time that is collecting data on a very regular basis in terms of what's happening across the different government agencies and how is that translating into improvement of lives, because that's the ultimate goal. How is it helping Rwandans, their lives become better? And this is data that is openly available. If you go to the Institute of Statistics website, if you go to the government services that we have, Fred has been talking about, the information available online. We have land data online, we have business data online, we have income data online. All of these things are publicly available, and it's what is informing policy. We are very keen on making sure that our policy is driven by evidence, data.
Now, Ted, to come back to you, the World Bank's Doing Business reports is actually one of the main factors that have contributed to developments of the business environment reforms here on the continent. And since its inception, we've seen some critics come forward and saying that it promotes one-size-fits-all kind of agenda. What is your take on this? Do you think that reality on the ground, different countries have different needs, have different solutions? What do you make of this?
It's a cross methodology. So for me, it's the best way you can do it, because if you want to compare people, you need to have the same methodology. So from a scientific perspective, it makes sense. The problem is we have so many countries without systems and accountability culture. So people don't like to be assessed. That is a fact. So those people will always claim, but people who are using the report, this ranking as an opportunity to improve their systems, they're happy with it. Actually, you understood that Rwanda is open to that report because Rwanda have that political will to improve things.
Louise, you can also share.
Once you demystify all these barriers and you unlock, efficiencies in terms of cost and procedure, more people are willing to enter the formal sector. So we used to have maybe about 5,000 to 6,000 businesses registered annually. Today it's upwards of 13,000. It used to cost 315% of GDP for you to start a business. Now it's absolutely free of charge. We've also seen a lot of transactions on property. Once you establish secure property rights and secure property systems, we used to have maybe only 100 businesses or so that were able to go to the bank to get a mortgage. Now it's close to 14,000. So very real impact on the ground in terms of what people are able to do in terms of business, the kind of transactions they can do within the formal sector, and also very strong growth in businesses, and obviously the tax base. Once you have more businesses operating in the economy, your tax base definitely widens.
That brings us to the end of today's panel discussion. We got to digest and understand the ease of doing business reforms. I was your host, Narengwa Fiona Muthoni.